Thanks, Sarah. I'm sorry about the. Hopefully that doesn't come through the
It's all
background
good.
noise. um, Guys, thank you very much. After some quite technical and really great presentations, I'm taking a step back and a slightly more philosophical and high-level discussion because I want to talk about the social compact that underlies or is so closely involved in this concept of a just transition. You know, we talk about the just transition, and we've been talking about it on quite a technical level, but there's a broader and more fundamental change needed here and some broader work. And so I've been quite deliberate about the agenda for a future period. You know, this is not, we mustn't confuse ourselves. We're not talking about specifically for mining or what is one country going to look like. This is what does the world look like as we move forward. I want to introduce you to my son. I want to start off with that. So if I ramble today or anything sounds a little incoherent, it's because I haven't slept in 16 weeks. But also if I flirt with sometimes sounding a little bit overly emotive, it's because there's a good reason to be. And I think for all of us, it's useful to remind ourselves that these little things are a lot of the reason why we're doing this. Okay, is what does that next generation look like? We're only stewards of our time, and we will pass. And what does the next guy look like? Just so everybody's clear, that's a child, not actually a penguin. It's a child in a penguin suit. Anyway, that's my boy Colin, but I'm conscious he's been born at this terrible time. He's going to live through turmoil like humanity may never have seen before. You know, as climate change really comes to bear, we've got this continued political instability. We're going to see more and more breakouts of war closer to home. We're going to see the knock-on effects of how those wars, I mean, we're seeing how the war in the Ukraine is affecting the world, but that's going to grow, and we're going to see how that impacts supply chains, how it impacts our access to services that are necessary for survival. You know, at the very best, we're going to watch the global economy kind of shift into some new paradigms that we don't really understand yet, and we don't know what that's going to look like. And I hope it's a shift. I hope it's a transition, because the alternative is significant. And we'll come back to that now. But saying that, I'm also conscious that Colin's very fortunate because he's been born into relative prosperity. He's been born into a family with the means to make sure he has access to good healthcare. He has access to good education. We have discretionary time, so we can make sure that we spend time with him. I don't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to walk 10 kilometers to catch a taxi for 2 hours so that I can get to a job that's going to pay me, you know, 300 Rand a day. He has a full-time nanny that takes care of him while my wife and I are working. And, you know, and while we're working, we get to do it at home. So he has all of these benefits and privileges and enormously fortunate things. And I think for most of us, many of us on the call, that's the kind of life that we experience. You know, we're in a similar situation. Anyway, I tell you about Colin for two reasons. One is I want to personalize some of the discussions that we're having. We can often talk about these things in quite an academic way, but there are real impacts here, and there are impacts on us, and it's important that we bring that home. This is not just something that is part of our job. And secondly, you know, we have this urgent and pressing need for a new social compact that's going to support, it's going to enable, and it's going to drive the just transition. And so I want to ask, we'll start with the question. I want to open with the question here. You can just chew on it while we talk, while I go over and chew on it over the weekend and think about it next time that you're sitting in a meeting planning a mine expansion or a community relocation or, you know, a share scheme payout. When you're planning how you're going to work with the clients on anything, on any of their engagements, just think about this question. You know, what society would I like to have been born into? We can't all be born into the world that Colin's been born into. Many of us are born into a place with enormous loss and lack of privileges, of access. You know, it's not just wealth. We talk about whether you could be born with good or bad health, from a rich or a poor family, ill or well-educated, atheistic or religious, grew up in a big city or in the countryside. You know, would you want to be born into a world where you have very few rights, or where you have complete rights? You know, there are many different questions about this. And some of this comes back to a dialogue I had some years ago. I was at this conference, and to start, their warmer was we sat down in pairs. It was a conference to talk about race and racism. And we sat down in pairs, and we had to tell each other why we were there. I'm very woke. I'm very connected. I know, you know, I'm very sensitive. I'm very socially conscious. And I said to the woman that I sat opposite, I said to her, I'm very aware of my privileged position, and I want to know how I can change things. I'm very aware that there's this imbalance and this unfairness in the world, and I want to know what I can do to fix that. And she said to me, and I'm going to tone down the language a little bit, but she said to me, don't you dare. She said, it's got nothing to do with you. It's not your job. You come from the top of the totem pole. You sit, and all of us on this call sit somewhere close to that top of the totem pole. You know, maybe not all right at the top, but we're all pretty close. Whatever changes we try to make in the world will always be about us. It will always come from us. It will always come from our position of power. So the best thing that we can do is be open to that change happening, rather than not open. In fact, I've just finished reading the most amazing book, which I can recommend to everybody, just about how, as power shifts, as economic power shifts in the world, what does that look like? And how does that lead to unrest and changes? And so this comes to this thing of, you know, with great privilege comes this great responsibility, but also great risk. The transition to a low carbon future is a technical one, and it's going to happen, okay? Or it's going to fail. And if it fails, then we're all in trouble, all right? But if it happens and we manage this transition and we get to this low carbon future, unless we fundamentally rethink and re-baseline our socio-economic compact, well, then it's going to, you know, things are going to kick off. We have to rebuild the socio-economic structure in a way that is less based on wealth accumulation and more based on security and quality and meaning of life, you know, for a broad base. And we, those of us on this call, those people attending this presentation, we don't necessarily get to be the ones who decide what that looks like. We need to engage and really reach out and try and understand our job, our role is to listen. It's to listen really hard. And I thought Sarah's question earlier of have we asked communities what it is they want to see is a great example of that. That's an example of listening, of us going out and saying, well, what do you need? What is it that you need? You lead us, you guide us. People who are at the bottom of the totem pole, people who are they're going to feel the effects of climate change much harder than we will. They're going to feel the pain of these economic changes much harder than we will. We will survive. We will find our way through. But if we don't re-baseline the socioeconomic structure, we're going to end up with some you know, then we run big risks. And if anybody doesn't recognize that picture, it's of the French Revolution. Hopefully everybody does, but just for. Anyway, but look, that's enough navel gazing from me. Let's get into what this means for mining and how we can get into some discussions on mining. In order for us to accomplish any of these changes and shifts around the social compact, we need to build that accomplishment on the basis of relationship. As we expand the relationship, so we expand the opportunities for accomplishment, and they expand proportionately. But we've got to work on that. We have to start at that basis. We can share, we can spread, but we have to start at that basis of relationship. If we think about mining and some examples recently, I mean, this all happened in the last couple of weeks. Look, the pictures on the left are of striking miners. You may or may not recognize the bottom one. It was a very famous picture from the Marikana strikes, the strikes that led to the Marikana massacre. But these strikes are ongoing. Sibanye is currently under strike. You know, and it's the same industry, but in two different worlds. And this is not to not to have a go at Sibanye and the big payouts that have just happened. Not at all. You know, I think a lot of mining executives and a lot of mining companies have gotten these big payouts, and I don't make any judgment or value call around that. But I think what is important is that we're talking in one industry, but these are fundamentally separate worlds that people are living in. And the breakdown in trust that happens, this thin red line is not that thin, it's a significant one. And suddenly we collapse the ability to talk across those two worlds. You know, Sibanye, when you know the full story, is doing incredible work. I mean, they really are one of the leading companies in South Africa in terms of positive social impact. But how do we position that? How do we share that? So there's a breakdown in trust between labor and mining. There's a further breakdown in trust between government and everybody, you know, and of course I use the South African example, but the British will know all about the breakdown in trust with government. I mean, worldwide, you know, the Americans are seeing the same thing. So how do we begin to rebuild that trust? And unless we do, we can never have this accomplishment relationship basis. Fernando Flores and Robert Solomon have written this great book around building trust in business, in politics, in life. And their thesis is, trusting is something we do. It's something we have to do on an ongoing basis. We build, we maintain, we sustain it. It's easily broken, very difficult to build, easily broken, but we have to build it. If we don't build it in mining, we will not be allowed to continue mining in whatever form that looks like, whatever mining looks like, to Johannes's point earlier, you know, whether it's extraction or whether it's recycling, or whether it's anything. We have to start from that basis of trust. We have to begin creating that. And there's a pretty straightforward formula for trust, because many of the people on this call, I guess, will be engineers and geologists and smart people who like formulas. So I thought, well, coming from the softer side, let's have a look at one of those. We've got to think about credibility. Can I trust what you say is objectively true? How sincere are you? Can I trust that you mean what you say? And then how reliable are you? Can I trust that you will do what you say? Finally, we have this kind of common interest, this alignment question. And this is a good formula, because when we can align on where we're going, that has a massive impact. I mean, it's the denominator that has a big impact on whether or not we can build that trust. But if we break any of those top three, we're going to miss it. So specifically speaking, I want to specifically speak now to credibility and reliability. And from a mining company's perspective, I think, you know, when we start to engage, when we start to discuss, when we start to share, there's been some talk about reporting. Phil brought up this question around, well, what gets shared, what doesn't get shared. Mining companies need to start to open their kimonos, as it were. And some of them are doing amazing work around this, but we're thinking in terms of whole value. We're thinking in terms of ceilings and foundations. I'm sure everyone here knows of donut economics. Sorry, I'm not trying to find the book here, but it's lying here somewhere. Everyone knows of Kate's donut economics concept. That is one of the most fundamentally mind-shifting economic structures that we can think of, and we've got to be thinking in those terms. We have to think about whole value. We have to think about the fact that we can no longer consider companies to be doing well or poorly based on their financial performance. We have to look at their full performance, their total performance across all dimensions. And if we can do that, then we can begin to travel along this roadmap. A roadmap is not a series. We always like to draw roadmaps. Everybody does. They draw it as a straight line. And they go, well, we're going to go from here to there, to there, to there, to there, and then we're there. But that's not going to happen. The world is way too complicated for that. What we need is this kind of broad map, and then some goals, some objectives, some things that we want to hit, all right, broadly. And a good example is the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a fantastic broad objective that everybody can start to work towards. And we may or may not hit them, but it gives us a guiding star, a guiding principle. We can all travel there by different routes. And so I think that comes down to my final point, and yeah, I don't want to overrun here, but my final point about this this just transition. The just transition is going to need a new social compact. The moving towards that is going to be a series of ongoing. They're going to continue. It's not a. This is not a one-stop thing. We don't stamp it and say, okay, we've succeeded. It's going to be often clumsy. We are going to make mistakes. Communities are going to. Right. But we need to move towards a more formally inclusive socio-economic model. And I don't talk just economic, because maybe as we move forward, maybe there aren't jobs for everybody. You know, maybe in the new, maybe in a low cost, low carbon energy rich future, maybe not everybody needs to have a job, and that's okay. Maybe we move into a totally different structure. So we need to be thinking in terms of the socio-economic model that is formally inclusive, that includes everybody. We can't allow ourselves in 10, 15, 20, 30 years to have, you know, 25, 30% of the world wondering where they're going to get their next meal and not able to take care of their children. So this is going to require transparency and whole value visibility, that again, that whole value that I was talking about. And it will require that trust to be gifted and then to be honored through visibility, through tracking, through sharing, all of these points. Sarah, that's what I'd like to leave everybody with. And I know it's going to make small incremental changes, but I hope it latches on for people somewhere.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Zach. As always, truly brilliant. Everyone, please put your hands together for the fabulous Zach Wood. Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Zach. And thank you also to your dogs in the background. We've had much pet participation over the course of the last week.
Sorry about them. They've got no respect.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, Zach, there are so many aspects that I could lean into with regards to your presentation just now. And I think that the one just from your second last slide, where it's like, we know where we've got to get to, we know what that guiding star is, and it's totally okay for us all to take slightly different routes to be able to get there. And I think that respect for the fact that everyone probably will take a slightly different route is something that's so important. So brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think as well, I know that everyone is sitting here. Again, I've got lots of messages coming in behind the scenes, general appreciation and love for you, I think, Zach, and your new little person, and what he has also brought to the party. So brilliant, Zach. Thank you so much. Massive round of applause.